The story kicked off with a strange idea, that when someone cared for something long enough, even dead objects could grow a soul. But once that same thing got tossed out like garbage, its soul was treated like nothing. That thought alone set the mood, creepy and symbolic, showing this world wasn't playing around. Then the camera rolled through a spotless city, shiny streets, perfect skies, everyone dressed in clean white like they were walking detergent ads. Inside one fancy house, a little girl ripped her new doll. It was just a tiny tear, nothing serious. But instead of fixing it, her family tossed it, because buying another one was easier. In this city, broken things didn't get repaired, they just got replaced. The doll slid down into the trash system, and suddenly the story started drawing lines between tossed objects and tossed people. Deep underground, the garbage piled up inside a massive warehouse. That's when Rudo showed up, creeping through the shadows, mask on his face. He was the so-called trash thief, and he had done this more than once. He picked through the junk carefully, but this time, a guard caught him.
Hold it right there! You're that trash raider, aren't you?
The alarms blared, and suddenly the city's spotless reputation had a stain running through it. The guard shouted his name, calling him the trash thief, the one who dared to mess with their perfect image. Rudo didn't stick around. He threw a bag of junk to cause chaos and bolted. Bullets chased him through the tunnels. One clipped his arm, but he didn't slow down. With speed and skill, he cut through the shadows and escaped. When it was over, he didn't look angry. He looked heavy, weighed down. Turns out, he hadn't even stolen gold or tech. He had just grabbed that broken doll. Meanwhile, on the rich side of town, two prim girls gossiped about the trash thief. They couldn't believe someone was stealing garbage. To them, it had to be a tribe fog, those poor souls outside the walls that everyone looked down on. Their talk only showed how deep the hate ran. Nearby, a ragged man heard everything, but kept his mouth shut. He walked to the city gates, stepped out, and the picture flipped. Clean streets turned to filth, shiny walls turned to rot, and the tribe fog side looked broken in every direction. In the slums, people whispered nervously about the theft. Everyone knew the guards could punish them all just for being from the wrong side, but tucked in a corner, Rudo sat, working on the doll. His hands moved with care, showing he treated junk with more respect than the city treated its people. Chiwa showed up, scolding him for dragging more trash home. She worried, and for good reason. If the guards caught him again, it could get ugly. But Rudo didn't stop. He believed the rich threw away things that still held value, and he wanted to save them. It wasn't just a hobby. He repaired things and sold them for scraps of cash to get by, but their chat got cut when three boys pulled up. They mocked him for the smell, the gloves, and his trash obsession. They even tried to clown Chiwa for hanging around him. Chiwa shut them down, reminding them they were all stuck in the same slums. But the boys weren't done. They brought up his father, the man who killed people and got tossed into the pit. That shadow followed Rudo everywhere, and to them, he was nothing more than a killer's son. Rudo's temper flared. Eyes burning so hard the boys backed off. Chiwa stayed, calm and steady, reminding him she believed he was different, nothing like the man they hated. Her words cooled him down, and then the camera showed the repaired doll. It wasn't for sale. He had fixed it as a gift for her. But before he could hand it over, her mother called, and she left. Rudo went back to his broken little house, where Regto was waiting. Regto picked up on his nerves and teased him, hinting the doll was meant for someone special. He wasn't blood, but he had raised Rudo as his own, and even through the jokes, Rudo's respect for him was clear. Regto kept warning Rudo, stealing trash was playing with fire. He didn't want the kid risking his life over junk. Then he spotted the cut on Rudo's hand and told him to take the gloves off. Once the gloves came off, the truth was out. Those hands looked dark, twisted, almost cursed. Rudo believed it was his father's curse passed down, and the gloves were the only way to hide it. Regto patched the wound himself and laid it out straight. In this world, crimes didn't end in prison. They ended in death, and death meant the pit, a bottomless hole where criminals got tossed in and erased forever. Even Rudo's father had been swallowed by it. Memories came rushing back for Rudo. His hands always drew stares, whispers, and judgment. Nobody treated him like a kid, just a monster's son. Only Regto had accepted him, slipping him those gloves that dulled the pain. Since then, Rudo never took them off. Regto's support was the only anchor he had. The old man cracked a joke, teasing about confessing to Chiwa before someone else stole the chance. For a moment, they laughed it off. But outside, in the dark, a stranger was already watching their house. By morning, Regto told him to smile more and sent him out. Rudo stepped into the streets with the doll in hand, ready to find Chiwa. On his way, he stopped near the pit. The thing looked endless, swallowing trash and people without mercy. That day, he even watched another poor soul shoved straight in. That's when Chiwa found him. She asked if he really came to watch, then broke it down. Their whole slum was built next to the pit as a warning. Step out of line, and you get tossed too. Fear was stitched into their daily life. She admitted she didn't want him ending up like his father. If the guards caught him stealing again, they wouldn't hesitate. Rudo agreed. Regto had said the same. As they stood there, her emotions slipped. She confessed that she and Regto cared deeply for him. Rudo froze, caught off guard.
Are you okay?
And I was like, oh, Chiwa might really like you.
Then finally handed her the doll. She accepted it, promising to keep it close. His heart lit up, but he still hadn't said what he really felt. On his way back, he brushed past city guards without a second thought. He rushed to Recto's house, ready to spill everything about Chiwa. But once the door opened, the world collapsed. Recto was on the floor, stabbed. A man stood over him, clutching a strange book. Rudo tried fighting back, but the man beat him down, tied him up, and escaped with the book. Recto, barely alive, gave him one last command, escape and change the world. Then he was gone. The guards stormed in, found Rudo there, and instantly pinned the blame on him. They didn't listen, didn't care. Neighbors whispered, calling him a killer, just like his father. Dragged to the pit, he was declared guilty, trash thief, murderer, unworthy of life. The crowd cheered for his death like it was entertainment. In the crowd, he saw Chiwa. He tried to explain, but her face turned cold. She dropped the doll, walked away, broken. The mob screamed trash, screamed killer. Rudo shouted back, calling them blind fools. Then his eyes caught the real killer in the crowd, standing free. Nobody else noticed. Before he could fight it, he was shoved into the pit. The fall felt endless, rage burning with every second. He swore revenge, swore he'd crush the world that threw him away. Finally, he smashed into a mountain of garbage. He was beaten, bleeding, but alive. The silence didn't last. Something moved in the piles. Rudo turned and saw it, a towering beast, built completely from trash, rising over him. So first, the scene jumped back to Rudo's childhood, and back then he always wondered what really happened to the poor souls tossed into the pit. Back then, the city told everyone the same thing, and according to them, those people were born filthy, doomed from the start, and destined to fall. Then, as the story shifted again, it cut straight back to the present, and now Rudo himself had become one of them. In other words, which was a clear reminder that not everyone survived this nightmare. Then, when he looked up at the faint light far above, he screamed in rage and despair, and right after that, he slipped, tumbling into a deeper valley where the poison grew thicker and the air cut harder into his lungs. At that point, he realized if he didn't find shelter soon, then he'd choke out just like the rest. Soon enough, his chest tightened, and blood spilled from his mouth, and while fear clawed at him with every step, he remembered Recto, and just like that, the hopelessness snapped. After that, his fists clenched, and sparks began crawling across his gloves. A flicker of red burned out, and then a broken pipe glimmered at his feet. So, without hesitation, he picked it up, and when the first beast lunged, he smashed its face in with all his rage. Meanwhile, from the shadows, someone was already watching. From that point on, Rudo fought like a cornered stray, and every piece of trash he touched turned into a weapon. For instance, broken rods became blades, cloth scraps became whips, and his fury carried every swing. The glow around him burned brighter, and as another monster charged, he tore it apart in a single strike. Then, when the biggest beast hurled him across the field, he crashed into the dirt, and instead he strapped a gas mask on Rudo's face, which gave him air again. But as soon as Rudo wouldn't stop pushing for answers, the man snapped, and he unloaded on him, blaming Spares for drowning the world in filth. That yelling, of course, brought in more monsters, and suddenly the fight kicked off again. In that instant, the man spun his umbrella, and energy poured through it, and with one swipe, he chopped off. Then, step after step, he cut them down like nothing, and to Rudo it looked like murder and magic wrapped into one. After that, the giant beast hurled a stone the size of a house, but the man sliced it mid-air, flipped his umbrella into a cannon, and blew the monster apart. Once silence fell again, the weapon folded back to normal. Finally, for something long enough, then it will feel alive. Rudo believed him, and from then on, the gloves became his anchor. Back in the present, he woke up tied and dragged across the wasteland by Engine. He begged to go back to the surface, but Engine told him the truth. The world above was called the Spare. The people were Spares, and once someone fell into the pit, there was no going back. According to Engine, the place itself was always moving, impossible to reach again. Even then, Rudo didn't stop. They had only ever seen Spares as corpses, never alive. Whispers ran through it again. Next they bound him to a truck, mocking him, calling him valuable, and bragging about how much he would sell for. To them, living Spares were jackpots. And since they blamed Spares for the poison, the filth, the monsters, and the deaths of their families, they saw him as nothing but walking punishment. So then, they shoved food into his mouth, mocking him, assuming he'd gag on it. Instead, Rudo bit a man's finger clean, chewed the food on his own, and glared while his red glow returned. At that moment, the chains rattled, but when they tried to strip the chain from him, he grabbed a tire, and it glowed too. He shaped it into a weapon, shocking everyone. And Rudo stared at his hands in disbelief. Engine, however, had seen enough. He offered him a path. Learn about the world, sharpen his power, and join the cleaners. Rare ones like Rudo didn't come around often. Still, Rudo turned away, his fire burning hotter than ever. Rudo got patched up after his run-in with the trash monsters. At first he thought the doctor was some cranky old man, but under the mask it turned out she was a sharp woman with zero chill. She stitched him up while roasting him for being reckless, reminding him that a few more breaths of poison air would have ended him, and that he barely avoided being kidnapped on top of it. She finished by pointing out the obvious. He was alive only because Engine stepped in. After that, Rudo caught Engine outside. He tried to be grateful, but he doubled down. He wasn't joining any team. All he wanted was a ticket back to the surface. Engine didn't bother sugarcoating it. Down here, Spares were hated like poison, and if anyone found out who he was, he'd be dead before he blinked. Knowledge ruled the pit, and nothing came free. If Rudo wanted answers, he'd have to stay close. The two grabbed a meal, and that's when Rudo's view cracked wide open. He'd always pictured the pit as endless trash, but tucked between the filth were whole cities, packed with people hustling and surviving. Over food, Engine laid it out. The pit ran on a strange force called anima. Over time, that energy clung to objects people cared about. That same power twisted into the monsters crawling out of the heaps. Regular weapons were useless against them. Only anima-soaked items, vital instruments, could cut through. Tools with history, soul, memory, a cook's knife, a writer's pen, a father's gloves. Rudo's gloves? They were exactly that, which meant he had the spark to fight. Not everyone could use anima, only a chosen few called givers. Engine was one. Rudo was one. Regto's words hit him hard then. Care for something long enough, and it gains a soul. That soul was anima all along. Engine finally dropped the name of his squad, the Cleaners. Their whole job was wiping out trash beasts and recruiting givers. When Rudo asked if joining meant he'd see the surface again, Engine didn't fake it. He admitted he didn't know. But their boss might, and if Rudo wanted answers, he'd have to meet that boss face to face. Before leaving, Engine asked about the gloves. Rudo explained they were the last thing his father gave him. Engine told him that connection was the reason they pulsed with anima. Then he tossed Rudo a pouch of money, paid for by selling his old surface clothes.
Charity is its own reward. Get back here so I can kick your ass!
Rudo barked at him, but Engine reminded him those clothes marked him as an outsider. Wearing them would have been suicide. Once Engine left, Rudo muttered to himself about bailing as soon as he got what he needed. That plan barely left his mouth before a cat stole his pouch and sprinted off. Rudo chased it down alleys, grabbed a wooden staff to corner it, and got his money back, only to realize the staff belonged to someone else. The owner, Zonka, stepped out, eyes locked on him. He shoved Rudo, snatched his staff, and spun it with deadly skill. That's when Rudo spotted the cleaner badge. Zonka wasn't random, he was family business, and that stick wasn't just wood. It was a vital instrument. The fight kicked off. Zonka's staff morphed metallic, humming with anima, and he called Rudo by name. This wasn't just a brawl. This was the trainer Engine had mentioned. He pressed Rudo hard, mocking his roots, poking his pride. Rudo almost snapped, but Recto's voice cut through. If someone snatched his gloves, he'd be furious too. Instead of raging, he apologized. Zanka blinked, surprised, and backed off, even through his own apology. Rudo froze. Words had just ended the fight. Another lesson from Recto, proven real. Zonka helped him up, asked about his weapon. Rudo showed the gloves, confessed he didn't know what they could really do. Zonka respected it, but dug deeper. Why was he even here? Rudo answered straight. Just temporary. Once his goal was done, he was gone. Still, he caught Zonka half smiling, and he remembered Regdo saying smiles could shift people. He tried one of his own. It backfired. His smile was twisted, cursed, nightmare fuel. Zonka thought he was mocking him. Rudo swore he wasn't, tried again, mouth closed, and somehow made it worse. Zonka snapped, roasting him for having a smile that could scare babies. The tension flipped back into another fight. This time, Zanka cut deep, warning that cleaners risked everything every day, and accusing Rudo of acting special. That hit a nerve. Rage boiled up, and Recto's last words cut through. Change this rotten world. Rudo grabbed a metal rod, and it flared with anima. Zonka froze. One instrument was supposed to be the limit, but Rudo had just turned random junk into a weapon. His gloves weren't normal, they let him transform anything. The clash intensified. Zanka's staff flew with precision. Rudo lagged behind, but still landed a hit. Instead of damage, Zanka's face got smeared with filth. When he wiped it off, he froze. It was a toilet plunger. Rudo didn't even know what it was, but Zanka screamed it was for cleaning toilets. Rudo shrugged, swung again, and the humiliating duel spiraled out of control. Zanka backpedaled, trying to shield himself from a bathroom tool-turned-weapon. Rudo pressed, spraying him with dirty water until Zanka stood drenched and broken. That's when Engine strolled in, saw the scene, and burst out laughing. He cracked jokes about toilet spray, teased them about friendship, while Zanka sulked in silence. Rudo just stood there, processing that his first real fight was fought with plumbing gear. Engine finally explained the truth. Zanka might be eccentric, but he was one of their best. He spoke the language of vital instruments better than anyone. From this point on, he'd be Rudo's trainer. Zanka overheard, and for once, he looked surprised. He hadn't realized Engine respected him that much. As they prepared to head out, Rudo spotted a girl by the car. Her name was Rio, another cleaner. She touched his dyed hair, teased him about the color, and he turned red instantly. For the first time since falling, he thought maybe life down here wasn't all bad. Engine broke the moment, telling them it was time to roll. Their next stop, the Cleaners HQ. Rudo finally rolled with Engine's crew, rolling alongside Zanka and Rio through a dead, hollow city until they cut through a tunnel that spat them out at the Cleaners' headquarters. At the front desk, a sharp-eyed girl named Semyu greeted them. Zanka and Rio peeled off, leaving Rudo in her care, while Engine said she had to check him first. Two flies buzzed near Rudo's head, and before he even twitched, Semyu skewered them with a fork like it was nothing. Her reflexes spoke for her, but her eyes said more. Engine explained that her vital instrument was her glasses, lenses that let her see past skin and bone, straight into a person's soul. When she peered into Rudo, she didn't find balance or light, just darkness sitting deep and heavy. The vision rattled her, but she brushed it off. Out loud she said his body was built strong, his gloves had potential, and he wouldn't need much physical training. His problem would be control. Quietly though, she noticed a strange mark curling around his neck, something she chose not to share. Engine laughed off the fly thing by joking about Rudo's smell, but deep down, even he knew Simu had seen more than she let slip. After that, Engine walked him deeper into HQ, pointing out how the cleaners were organized. About 100 members, split into 3 squads, combatants, sentinels, supporters. Most were scattered on missions, so the place looked emptier than it was. At one point, Engine accidentally slid open a door to a room packed with people yelling and training, then slammed it shut again, shaking his head at the chaos. Eventually, they reached the boss's room. Rudo only had one question on his mind, the way back up, but Engine warned him right then. In this world, nothing came free, not even answers. Work bought information, and curiosity about the boss's vital instrument was forbidden. No one knew what it was, and no one asked. The only thing certain was trust. When Rudo pushed into the room, it was empty. Simu explained the boss was away on business, not back for a few days. Rudo's patience cracked. He'd dragged himself here just for this meeting, and now he had to wait. Rio popped up and suggested he tag along on a mission until the boss returned. He couldn't call himself a cleaner yet, but he could at least watch how they worked. With a scowl, he agreed. Simu briefed them. A town near a polluted zone was under attack by trash beasts. Their job was simple: hold the barricades and wipe the monsters out. She explained the zones to him: safe zones where humans lived, polluted zones crawling with beasts, and no man's lands where survival was suicide. Rudo had fallen into one before, and without Engine's mask, he'd already be dust. Even polluted zones required masks, and she handed him one before they left. The team set out: Rio, Rudo, and a pack of supporters. Along the way, Rudo noticed underground towns thriving, a sharp contrast to his old belief that falling meant death. To him, the scattered trash didn't look like garbage. It looked like treasure waiting for repair. At the barricades, he met Grizz, a supporter with grip strength so ridiculous he nearly crushed Rudo's hand in a casual handshake. Rudo quickly realized supporters weren't just backup, they were lifelines. Grizz alone was strong enough to crack a monster's armor. Then the beasts came. At first, small goat-shaped ones rammed the barricades, weak and slow. Rudo's fear began to ease, but larger ram-like creatures thundered in next, shaking the defenses and sparking panic. Rio stayed cool, calm, even playful, reminding everyone that panic was death. The ground shook, and a massive beast pushed forward, dwarfing the rest. Rio finally unveiled her vital instrument. Ripper, a pair of scissors she didn't hold with her hands but with her feet, spinning them like blades. Supporters weakened monsters and tossed them her way, and she shredded them with lethal grace. Amid the chaos, one smaller beast slipped behind and lunged at Rudo. Grizz saved him, smashing it flat and hurling it into Rio's blades. Rudo started seeing it: the rhythm, the teamwork. Givers and supporters weren't rivals, they were two halves of survival, but the giant refused to fall. Even sliced in half, its body staggered forward. Normally, that should have been the end. This thing broke the rule. Rio fought harder, slashing for a weakness. Meanwhile, another beast pounced on a supporter, and Rudo jumped in, unwilling to be dead weight. His weapon morphed into a cage, trapping the monster. He froze in shock, not even sure how he did it, but Rio finished it clean and praised him for acting fast. The big fight dragged on. Rio cut deep into the beast's skull, and inside, something glowed. That was its true core. The monster raged, striking at both Rio and Rudo. Rudo wavered, calling himself useless, trash, thinking of Recto's death and his vow of revenge. Grizz grabbed him, forced him to stand tall, told him not to give up. With that, Rio lunged, striking the glowing core until the beast collapsed. It crumbled to dust, leaving behind something impossible: a knife, a vital instrument, lodged in its skull. The team froze. Trash monsters were never supposed to carry vital instruments. That discovery sent a chill through every one of them. They left unsettled, no answers in sight. Far away, another scene stirred. The same man who once tried to sell Rudo now sat shackled in a dim room. Across from him, a hooded figure waited in silence. When it finally spoke, it demanded only one thing: information about the boy from above. Rudo's fate was already being hunted. Zonka heard noise coming from a room, so he pushed the door open and found the cleaners in full party mode. Rio leaned over and explained it was a welcome party for Rudo. The vibe was loud and wild, but at the table sat Rudo, head down, drowning in his own thoughts. Rio whispered the truth. Yesterday's fight broke him. He couldn't get his power working right, and now his pride was cracked in half. Zonka pressed for details. Rio told him about the giant trash beast they faced, the one whose core wasn't anima, but a vital instrument buried inside. That twisted rule had shaken them all, so after dragging their bodies home, the squad started drinking to clear their heads. She added Engine and Semu would show up soon too. While the music thumped, Grizz stepped up to Rudo. He thanked him for saving Follow in the fight, but he asked why he looked like death warmed over. Rudo admitted he was frustrated. He saved Follow once. But after that, he was useless. Grizz and Rio had to drag him through the rest, same as back in the spare where Recto had always bailed him out. Yesterday, he couldn't even stand his ground, and he feared he'd always be dead weight until he found his way back above. Grizz didn't let it slide. He told Rudo most people treated supporters like trash, but Rudo respected them. Follow, for example, had joined to kill monsters, but without powers he couldn't. Still, he carried hope, treasuring an object in case one day he awakened. Even then, he wanted to stay a supporter, to prove their role mattered. Grizz asked Rudo straight, what did he want when he lived above? Rudo froze, couldn't answer. Grizz just told him to trust himself. That's when Engine walked in and asked if Rudo had eaten. Rio, Zanka, and Grizz waved him over, and slowly Rudo joined the table. For once, the weight lifted, even just a little. Then Gob started painting a wall, and elsewhere the man who once tried to sell Rudo spilled his guts to a stranger cloaked in shadows. The moment he was done talking, the stranger killed him instantly, muttering that Rudo would make a perfect gift. Back at HQ, Semyu received a call. A new mission was up, and this time it involved Zanka and Grizz's squad. Zanka questioned why Rudo was on the list. He wasn't even a cleaner yet. Semyu said the mission tied directly to him. A merchant passing through a polluted zone had his cargo stolen by a monster. The catch? That cargo wasn't an object, it was a human from the spare. Within weeks, 2 spares had dropped. Semyu figured Rudo would want to meet this newcomer, maybe find a clue about going back. Rudo hesitated, doubting himself, afraid of being useless again. But the chance to meet another person from above was too big to ignore. He agreed. Semyu admitted she wanted Engine on the job, but he was tied up, and he himself suggested Zanka. Zanka grinned like he had been waiting. The team rolled out. On the road, Rudo noticed Grizz carried no weapon. Grizz just grinned and said his fists were enough. Another cleaner explained Grizz also carried a talisman he prayed to before every mission. Grizz shrugged it off. Cheap charm, but praying never hurt. Not long after, a boy appeared, claiming to be the merchant who called them. Rudo jumped him with questions. What did the spirit look like? Did he say anything? The boy answered flatly. The man was unconscious. He hadn't asked. The only mission was to save him. Rudo pressed, suspicious, asking if the merchant planned to sell him. The boy insisted no. Zanka, though, kept his eyes sharp. Something didn't add up. Monsters didn't snatch humans. Not like that. The boy led them to a building, said the monster was inside. They walked in and saw a figure slumped in a chair. The merchant shoved them forward, yelling to save him. They got closer. It wasn't a man. It was a doll. The floor cracked and collapsed, dumping them into a basement. The merchant melted to clay, body falling apart. From the dark, 2 figures stepped forward. Raiders. Zanka recognized them on sight. Grizz explained quick. Raiders started as small-time thieves, but turned into a real threat. Every one of them was a giver. Their clay tricks had built the fake merchant, the fake hostage, and the trap itself. Grizz ordered the others to find a way out while he shielded Rudo. Zanka would handle the fight. Rudo wanted in. Grizz warned him hard. Raiders weren't petty thugs. They were killers. Survival meant escape, not fighting. Zanka squared up, asking why they wanted a sparite. Did people from above sell for that high? One raider laughed, said they didn't care about selling. They wanted knowledge of the upper world, and who better than Rudo, the boy who crossed the border alive? Zanka froze at the word. Border. So that was it. The whole trap had been built just for Rudo. The raiders raised their hands, and clay dolls rose from the dirt, copies with glowing eyes. Zanka realized this was their power, and hidden among them was the real pair. The ground softened to mud, dragging at his feet. One raider, a brawler with oversized sandals, blindsided him with brutal punches. The other, a woman with a scythe, twisted the soil itself. They mocked him, saying monster hunting was one thing, but against humans, he was out of his league. Blow after blow landed, but Zanka steadied himself. He muttered they talked too much, and he had already figured it out. The woman's scythe controlled soil. The man just hit hard, sandals stopping him from sinking. Zanka slammed his staff down, vibrations pulsing through the ground. He felt the difference between fake and real, doll and flesh. He swung with precision, cracked both raiders clean, and just like that, the dolls crumbled back into mud. He stood tall, calling them weak. Then a voice slid through the dark, cold and calm. Another figure stepped forward, the same one who had killed Rudo's captor. His eyes locked on Zanka, and he promised he'd share the same fate. Grizz and Rudo were running as fast as they could, but then something strange hit Rudo. Suddenly the world went silent. No footsteps, no echoes, no breath, nothing at all, and the emptiness left him dizzy. Even so, he kept moving with Grizz, both of them inching forward carefully until, after what felt like forever, an emergency exit finally appeared ahead. Just as a hint of relief slipped in, Rudo noticed odd shadows shifting across the walls, their shapes twisting in ways he couldn't fully grasp. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared in front of him. For a split second, Rudo thought it was Zanka stepping in to help, but as soon as the figure moved, he knew he was wrong. The speed was unreal. One blink and the stranger was already standing behind him. A low voice cut through the silence, muttering that this was the giver from above, and instantly the tension thickened. The cleaners knew it. They were staring at a raider. Grizz reacted first, throwing himself in front of Rudo to block the strike aimed at him. The raider didn't press for the kill immediately, instead circling closer, clearly enjoying the hunt. Grizz stood tall, declaring that if the raider wanted Rudo, then he would have to cut through him first, and after that, face every cleaner who still stood. Calmly, the raider began speaking, his tone confident, almost casual. He mentioned a special guy Rudo would supposedly enjoy meeting, and as he slipped his mask partly off to reveal his face, Rudo ignored the theatrics and instead asked about Zanka, the cleaner with the stick. With a mocking grin, the raider answered, He said the man with the stick had been strong but far too arrogant. He claimed he hadn't killed him, only poisoned and knocked him out, though he admitted the dose might have been too strong, so the man would probably take a while to recover. At that same moment, Zanka's battered body flashed into view elsewhere, showing just how badly he had been hurt. Then the raider made his offer. If Rudo came quietly, no one else would have to die. To prove his power, he even shifted his appearance, showing how easily he could change form. Other cleaners rushed in to stop him, but their attacks were meaningless. Not a single punch landed. The raider swatted them aside without effort, leaving them crumpled and broken. Grizz, however, did not flinch. He planted his feet and said he would protect his people, supporter or not. The raider gave him a nod of twisted respect, admitting that supporters usually had no power but still carried the will to defend, before raising his hands to reveal claws sharp enough to shred steel. Panic surged through Rudo. He shouted for Grizz to step back, insisting that without weapons he would die in seconds. Rudo begged to fight on his own, claiming he could handle himself, but the raider ignored him and pressed his claws straight into Grizz's chest. The sight shattered Rudo's heart. The claws raked through Grizz's hands too, tearing flesh until blood poured, and in the chaos his lucky charm slipped from his grip, clattering to the ground. That single moment dragged Rudo into memory. In the past, Recto had caught him banging his head against a wall. When asked why, Rudo confessed that he didn't know what was wrong. He tried to avoid hurting others, yet he always felt broken inside. Recto guessed it was guilt about his parents or the weight of feeling useless, and so he gave him advice. Find something you truly enjoy, cling to it, let it ground you. Rudo tried many things, but nothing worked, until one day he found a discarded doll in a trash bin. It wasn't broken, only abandoned, and fixing it gave him a strange, deep joy. Recto watched and understood. Rudo had a gift for restoring value to things the world had thrown away. Back in the present, Rudo picked up Grizz's lucky charm, and as he held it, the trinket began to glow. Grizz, barely conscious but still alive, whispered the truth. He said Rudo's gift came from giving life to discarded things, drawing out their hidden emotions, and turning them into strength. The charm swelled, transforming into something magnificent, and Rudo's eyes widened as he realized his vital instrument's true potential. He leaned close to Grizz, swearing he would not let him die, promising to save him. Grizz smiled weakly, thanking Rudo for reminding him what mattered, and the two locked eyes in one final moment of shared determination before the fight dragged them apart again. Then the raider finally introduced himself as Jabber. He said he planned to take Rudo away but wanted to enjoy himself first. Rudo gave his name back firmly, and Jabber glanced around at Grizz's broken body and the destruction scattered across the room. With no warning, Jabber struck, claws flashing, but Rudo didn't budge. The attacks hit, yet nothing happened. Jabber sneered and struck harder, sending a blast ripping through the floor, but still Rudo stood unharmed. Confusion twisted across Jabber's face until Rudo calmly explained. Grizz had prayed with the charm, and that prayer now shielded him. The fight escalated fast. Jabber hurled debris, slashed pillars, and struck wildly, but Rudo dodged with sharp precision, countering with clean hits that rattled him. Blood dripped from Jabber's nose, yet instead of anger, he laughed, ecstatic that the fight had finally become fun. He promised to enjoy the challenge and still drag Rudo away when he felt bored. Rudo smirked, telling him he wanted to play too, and the two clashed harder. Jabber tore through walls and pillars. Rudo weaved through the chaos, landing punches that grew heavier with every blow. Finally, Jabber crashed against a wall, blood spilling from his mouth, and admitted that the charm allowed Rudo to sense his strikes. But then he muttered something about smoke, hinting he had other tricks. Suddenly, he raised his hands and began cutting into his own body. Rudo froze, horrified, unable to process why someone would mutilate themselves mid-fight. Blood ran freely as Jabber carved deep, his body trembling until he nearly collapsed. Yet instead of falling, he rose again, grinning through the pain, his form twisted, muscles swelling, his body warping into something monstrous. And just like that, the real fight was about to begin. The fight between Rudo and Jabber grew sharper with every exchange, and then Jabber suddenly drove his own poisoned claws into his chest, because in his twisted logic, he believed that if he tore away his conscious control and slipped into a half-unconscious frenzy, then Grizz's talisman would stop seeing him as an enemy. And for a terrifying moment the plan seemed to work, since his body shook violently, his breath turned ragged, and his scream warped into something broken and feral. Rudo immediately noticed that Jabber was no longer steering himself, yet his speed and strength actually sharpened instead of faltering, and that realization filled him with dread, because he knew that continuing the fight here would not only risk his own life, but also drag Grizz and Follow into the grave. He thought about retreating to draw the danger away, but before the thought even settled, Jabber lunged with terrifying speed, his claws tearing down, and this time the talisman that had always shielded Rudo didn't move at all. Shocked and desperate, Rudo caught Jabber's wrist and twisted with everything he had, managing to hurl him aside, and for one breath he thought he was safe. But that hope died quickly when Jabber rose again, even more dangerous than before. In that instant, Rudo realized Jabber had already found a loophole, and the truth hit him. This opponent was too seasoned, the type of fighter who only grew stronger the more he suffered, the kind of person others spat at as a masochist. That single word yanked Rudo into memory, back to childhood when bullies had beaten him bloody, mocking him for never fighting back, sneering that he must enjoy pain if he kept taking it, laughing as they called him a masochist. Snapped back into the present, the irony was cruel, because now Jabber's claws were slicing the air with perfect, merciless precision. One swipe cut straight for Rudo's face, and he braced for impact, but before the blow landed, a wooden staff cracked across Jabber's body and knocked him back. It was Zanka, staggering from poison and exhaustion, yet still smirking as he mocked Jabber for failing to finish him earlier and wasting time playing with a boy. Rudo stared at his battered state, worried he couldn't fight, but Zanka brushed the concern aside and said he was fine, then noted that Rudo had clearly figured something out with his power. At the same time, though, he calmly pointed out that the talisman wasn't protecting him anymore. When Rudo admitted the truth, Zanka explained what he had seen while watching the fight. The talisman only reacted when the attacker carried a clear, conscious intent to kill, and since Jabber was no longer thinking like a normal man, the charm simply stopped working. After that, Zanka laid out a risky plan. He would strike Rudo with his staff to test if the talisman reacted, because if it did, the force would launch him forward and give him the chance to slam Jabber. If it failed, then the hit would land on Rudo instead. Rudo had no time to weigh the gamble, because Jabber was already storming back in, claws dripping, and Zanka quickly warned him not to let even a scratch touch skin, since one graze of poison would end him. Then, without hesitation, Zanka swung his staff straight into Rudo. The talisman erupted with red energy, not harming Rudo but blasting Zanka forward, and in a blink his staff smashed into Jabber's face, sending him flying. Both men froze in surprise, because neither thought such a reckless idea would work, but Zanka laughed it off as dumb luck and declared that now they would finish this fight together. From that moment, their rhythm turned strange, yet deadly effective, because Zanka kept swinging his staff at Rudo, and every time the talisman hurled him forward, turning him into a human projectile that crushed Jabber again and again. The strikes came in waves, each one heavier, and Jabber's body rattled until his eyes flickered with awareness. Zanka seized that single chance, drove one last strike into his skull, and dropped him cold. But the effort cost him everything, and his poisoned body finally gave out. As silence returned, Rudo glanced down at Grizz's talisman, only to see cracks spreading across it, and moments later it crumbled apart in his hands. He couldn't understand why it ended so suddenly, but Zanka, lying half-conscious on the floor, muttered that maybe the instruments Rudo created couldn't last long, or maybe another hidden rule was at play. For Rudo, though, the thought cut deep. Grizz's talisman had been precious, and now it was gone because of him. Before Rudo could even think about what just happened, sharp pain spread across his body, and his legs buckled until he collapsed flat on the ground. Zanka's eyes widened as he spotted claw marks tearing across Rudo's back, and he realized with horror that Jabber must have struck him earlier without either of them even noticing. Slowly, Jabber rose again, his voice broken and almost casual, muttering that he could not even remember what he had done while unconscious, though clearly the gamble had worked. Zanka could not believe the sight, because after all that punishment Jabber was still standing, but the raider calmly explained his trick. His left claw stripped away pain so he could move without feeling a thing, while his right claw carried poison, which he had already sunk into Zanka. For Jabber, the venom only lasted 10 minutes, since his own body was immune, but for Zanka, the effect stretched out to 30 full minutes, long enough to leave him helpless. To prove it, Jabber raked his claw across him again, and Zanka's body dropped, powerless on the ground. With Zanka down, Jabber turned to Rudo, who lay stiff from the poison, and admitted coldly that if he failed his mission, punishment would follow, so he could not return without capturing him. He scooped Rudo into his arms and began dragging him away, while Zanka, half-conscious, could do nothing but watch. Jabber leapt out of the basement carrying his prize, but when he surfaced, he froze. The walls were shattered, the ground torn with rubble, and standing among the wreckage was Rio, her stance unshaken. Then Engine stepped forward, umbrella in hand, and without hesitation, drove it into Jabber's stomach, calling him filth that needed to be cleaned. Engine scolded him sharply, pointing out how he had trapped their allies underground to cut them off from help, though luckily, Tomei had escaped to send word. Tomei fretted for Grease and the others still buried, but Engine assured her they were too strong to die so easily, and sent a team to pull them out. Jabber only laughed in return, sneering that everyone looked at him like trash and admitting that he enjoyed the insult. Engine sighed, remarking that Rudo had already suffered enough just surviving this madness, while Rio let out a shaky breath of relief, seeing that Rudo, though badly hurt, wasn't gone. Delmon bristled with fury, vowing he would never forgive Jabber for hurting their squad, but a comrade quickly pulled him back from acting rash. Engine stepped forward again, his tone like iron, warning Jabber that he would not walk away unharmed after attacking them. Jabber just laughed, mocking the idea of prison, boasting that he would only plan an escape, and then he admitted he would have preferred to run, but his mission bound him. He spread his claws wide, ready for another round, insisting that until Rudo was captured he could not retreat, even if it meant death. That was when another voice cut through. A girl appeared, Chthoni, her tone steady and firm as she told Jabber his time was finished and he had to return. Jabber refused, spitting that he could not leave without Rudo, but she repeated herself, sharper, warning him that the goon squad was already closing in. Engine narrowed his eyes, wondering who she was and where she had come from. Jabber bristled until she mentioned their boss, smiling wide, and that alone made his grin twist. With a crooked apology to the cleaners, he said he had to go. Rio then spotted at first, a strange hole opening behind them, its surface rippling like water. Jabber turned to Rudo with cheerful malice, saying their fight had been fun, and that despite coming from above, Rudo had shown real strength. Rudo, still pinned by the poison, burned with fury and shouted that the fight wasn't over, swearing that Jabber would pay for what he did to Grizz. Jabber smiled wider at the spirit, then his eyes dropped to Rudo's gloves. Recognition flashed as he muttered that they were part of a special series of items, the kind his boss would be very pleased to hear about. He promised he would return better prepared, and until then, Rudo should guard those gloves closely. With that, Jabber and Chthoni stepped into the portal, and as it rippled shut, silence fell heavy over the battlefield. The cleaners stood shaken, knowing their enemies had slipped away, while Rudo lay on the ground, mind clouded with anger and doubt, replaying Jabber's words about his gloves and wondering what secret they might hold. Soon after, the rescue team pulled Zanka and the others from the basement. Rudo rushed to Grizz's side, guilt crushing him as he apologized for breaking the talisman. Grizz, pale but smiling, shook his head and told him that although it had been precious, he was glad it helped when it mattered. He assured Rudo that he had fought well, and with that, the weight on Rudo's chest eased, even if only for a moment. After the brutal fight with Jabber, Rudo sat slumped outside the main hall, his head heavy with guilt. Jabber had managed to tear into Grizz while he himself had stood there powerless, and that memory pulled him straight back to Regto, to the moment he had failed him too. The thought circled again and again. Was he always going to be this weak, this useless? As he sat there stewing, Engine stepped out, his sharp eyes catching the frustration instantly. He told Rudo to stop eating himself alive because Grizz hadn't protected him out of pity. He had done it because he saw Rudo as a true ally. Then, instead of wasting the night sulking, Engine told him to get up and actually go see Grizz, who was awake and waiting inside. Dragging himself in, Rudo froze the second he saw Grizz. The man sat calmly on the bed, breathing steady, greeting him with that same warm tone, and even congratulating him for awakening his power. Rudo's jaw dropped. He had watched Jabber's claw pierce Grizz's chest, so how could he sit there so casually? Grizz explained that the medical team had done their job, but more than anyone, it was Asia, their only healer, who had pulled him back from death. Turning to Rudo, Grizz praised him and Zanka both for standing tall against such a nightmare, and when Rudo apologized for the broken talisman, Grizz only smiled, saying it had already fulfilled its purpose. Relief hit Rudo hard, and he admitted how glad he was to see Grizz alive. But the mood shifted when Engine spoke up, reminding them all that from here on out, their dangers weren't just trash monsters. Raiders were now in the game too. Just then, another cleaner stepped in, reporting that one of the captured raiders had been overheard whispering about something called the border. That word froze the room, because it meant the raiders weren't just picking fights. They were gathering knowledge about the connection between this ground and the world above. Confused, Rudo asked who exactly was pulling the strings. At that moment, Engine introduced him to the one he least expected, Corvus, the boss of the cleaners. Calm but sharp, Corvus admitted that he already knew Rudo's real purpose was finding a path back up, and usually someone like him wouldn't be allowed inside their ranks. But Corvus had also seen how Rudo had changed, how he had risked himself for others, and how his strange ability could change battles. For that reason, Corvus accepted him officially as one of the cleaners, and invited him into his office. Inside, Corvus explained the truth. The line between this world and the one above was called the border, and anyone who tried to cross it was said to die instantly. But there was more. Corvus told a strange story of a woman who lived deep inside no man's land, right near the border itself. Years ago, a lost traveler had met her, and when he asked why she lived in such hell, she answered that she watched the ones who fell from above. She even claimed some had not only fallen, but also climbed back up alive. The words hit Rudo like fire. If even one person had managed to return, then maybe he could too. Corvus leaned forward, pointing out the greater mystery, how Rudo himself had survived the fall when no one else ever had. Still, he warned that searching for her meant walking into death itself, because no man's land was a graveyard of monsters, raiders, and worse. Even so, when asked if he wanted to risk it, Rudo didn't hesitate. He had to go. Later, Follow cornered him, begging him not to chase such madness, warning him that it was suicide, but Rudo refused, saying this was the only road that could take him home. Engine then cut in, scolding him hard, reminding him that he couldn't just wander into that wasteland raw, not when he barely understood his own power. No man's land wasn't just dangerous, it was endless death, and going alone was a joke. Rudo asked if Engine would go with him, and Engine answered without pause, of course. He explained that the cleaners didn't just fight trash monsters, they studied them, and that knowledge was the edge they needed to survive. Raiders would be lurking too, so extra eyes mattered. For now though, he told Rudo to rest. Training followed soon after, but it was rough. Rudo couldn't even transform a knife. Engine teased him, saying too many sweets must have dulled his brain, while Rio defended him, saying at least he could stand again. Still, Rudo couldn't shake the confusion. Why had his ability suddenly shut down? That was when Zanka, watching closely, pieced it together. Rudo had always had a habit, fixing broken things, trash that others had thrown away. Maybe his power only worked on those. To test it, they tossed old scraps in front of him. When Rudo picked up a triangle-shaped shard, it glowed, transforming instantly into a weapon. Engine chuckled, praising Zanka for the sharp read. Rudo himself thanked him, and Zanka told him to try multiplying weapons. He succeeded, but then blood dripped from his nose, showing his body couldn't handle too many at once. Engine broke it down. The quality of the object mattered. The longer it was cared for, the stronger its anima. That was why Rudo's gloves, kept since childhood, carried such weight, but it also explained why his body strained under them. Zanka, thinking quietly, wondered if this tied into the special series Jabber had mentioned. Rudo then asked why his weapons always crumbled into dust. Rio explained that because he restored broken things to their peak, once they fulfilled their purpose, they simply vanished, just like Grizz's talisman. Engine added that this was Rudo's truth. He gave trash meaning again, and once that meaning ended, it rested. Rio then teased him. asking about his gloves, recalling Jabber's hint that they were part of some series. She asked what name he had given them, since every cleaner named their instruments. Her scissors were Ripper, Engine's umbrella was Umbreaker, Zanka's staff was Assistaff. Rudo admitted he had never thought of a name, and Engine told him flat out, he should. Far away, meanwhile, the raiders whispered to their leader. They spoke of the cleaners, of the desert city called Altar, of something named the Watchman series, and of the boy called Rudo. That night, Rudo sat alone, washing his gloves in silence. Pain crawled through his hands with every movement, yet he kept scrubbing, because keeping them clean felt like the only way forward. When he finally stepped back into his room, his mood cracked again. Rio was stretched out on his bed like she owned the place. She looked over lazily, and reminded him it was already 4 in the morning, then asked why he was still awake when they had a mission waiting tomorrow. Surprised and annoyed, Rudo asked what she was even doing in his room, and how she got in. Rio shrugged, saying her room was right above his, and when she heard his cries, she simply jumped down through the window. Her eyes drifted to his hands. She asked if they hurt. Rudo admitted that the gloves dulled the pain, but afterward the burning always came back. Rio frowned at the scars and asked if they were burns. Rudo muttered that she'd have to ask his parents about that, since they were the cruel ones who left those marks. For a moment she went quiet, then spoke softer. Parents always leave marks, some that help, some that scar. With that, she slipped out the window again, leaving him alone. By morning, preparations for the mission were in full swing. The boss told Engine that Rudo's full face mask still wasn't finished, and until it was, the team had to handle the rest. Curious, Rudo asked what made a full face mask different. Engine explained that in No Man's Land, masks had to cover the entire face, crafted by a special artist who only worked at his own pace. Right now, that artist was making one for Rudo. Until then, another giver would need to paint him a spell of protection. Normally that giver visited headquarters, but since he hadn't shown up for days, the cleaners had to travel to him instead. Their destination was Canvas Town, also known as the City of Graffiti. Engine introduced the full squad: Zanka, Rio, Delmon, and Tamzi, plus 3 supporters, Grizz, Follow, and Tommy. Usually 5 supporters came along, but this time the balance leaned toward more givers, since No Man's Land demanded firepower. Delmon immediately marched up to Rudo, shouting about how he had heard his life story, swearing he would never forgive the people who threw him down, and declaring his love for passionate types like Rudo. He loudly insisted Rudo join his group. Tamzi calmly cut in, reminding Delmon that Rudo already belonged to Engine's team, then apologized for the noise, explaining that Delmon was loud, but honest. Engine just laughed and told Delmon to deliver one of his trademark speeches. Zanka, already familiar, stuffed cotton in his ears. Delmon let loose, shouting with full fire about the path ahead, about how holes in the road meant nothing to cleaners who never stopped moving. His roar caught everyone else, and soon the group shouted with him before piling into the vehicle. The road carried them toward Canvas Town, a city built beneath a massive roof, with walls covered in endless paintings. Rudo asked if all cities were like this. Tamzi explained that most large settlements built shields overhead to survive the constant rain of trash from above, since anyone living outside those barriers often died under falling debris. As they approached the gates, 2 strangers stood frozen, unable to step through though the gate stood wide open. Yet when the cleaners walked forward, the barrier allowed them inside. Engine told Rudo to follow, explaining that the walls were painted with spells that blocked anyone with harmful intent. Inside, every wall screamed with color, painted with wild strokes and careful details. Engine said this was a city built for artists, a place where creativity was life itself. Their true goal was to meet Gob, the giver who painted spells of protection. Those outsiders at the gate had been stopped by Gob's barrier. Rudo stood in awe at the idea of a weapon that could shape trust itself. But then a girl bumped into Engine, eyes full of tears, before dashing away. The others teased him, saying he must have made her cry. A moment later, the mayor arrived to greet them. Engine explained their need for Gob's spells, but the mayor's voice dropped. Gob had died that very morning. They followed him to a room where Gob's body lay still. The mayor explained Gob's obsession with painting in polluted zones. His passion outweighed his caution, and one day he must have removed his mask. The pollution finished what his art had begun. Engine knelt quietly, grief pulling at him, while Rudo remembered the brief time he'd seen Gob at headquarters, and felt the weight settle heavy. Tamzi told him that death here was common, a cruel reality of the ground. The mayor continued. Before his death, Gob had chosen an heir, the very girl who had bumped into Engine. Her name was Remlin, and the paintbrush, passed down through generations, had already been entrusted to her. Follow leaned close to Rudo, whispering that while most givers needed years to bond with an object, some awakened instantly, especially when chosen directly. That made Remlin's case rare, but not impossible. The mayor admitted Gob and Remlin were like siblings. He had seen Gob smile through every brushstroke, painting joy into every wall. Though not an artist himself, he had become mayor because he loved watching others create. Engine, remembering Gob's visits, swallowed the grief. He knew he would never see that smile again. As they prepared to leave, Engine told Remlin to take care of herself, promising they would visit again. But Remlin's voice rose. Enough mourning, it was time to celebrate. Everyone stared in shock as she took the brush, climbed to the rooftops, and shouted that Gob would never want endless tears. With a sweep of the brush, her power bloomed. Paint cans burst into the sky, exploding into fireworks of color. The people gathered below, their eyes wide, their hearts lifting as light filled the city. Rudo watched, reminded of Regto, his chest tightening with old memory. The crowd cheered, the city came alive, and the mayor whispered his apologies for not delivering the spell they had come for. But Engine shook his head, smiling, saying the spell was already alive in front of him. Canvas Town had shown its true art. Joy painted over grief, color painted over loss. Rudo stayed mad at Remlin after she painted his face, and left him walking around looking clownish. She moved on to explaining her powers, but the more words she threw out, the less sense it made, and even Engine lost his patience. Her ability turned out to be pure chaos, something that bent to her will with no rulebook in sight. She switched gears and pulled a stunt that shocked everyone, turning her instrument into a tattoo gun just because it felt right to her. Engine and the mayor nearly flipped, but they didn't let her run with it. Before heading off, Rudo gave her thanks for what she had shown him earlier, and she promised with a smile that she would stop by Cleaner HQ someday. On the way back, Engine decided to treat Rudo with a detour straight into a junkyard mansion. Before Engine could finish talking about weapon choices, Rudo was already climbing the heap, snatching up scraps with the energy of someone who thought the garbage was gold. At HQ, the squad met August, the artisan who crafted their gear. The man looked high on good vibes and casually mentioned that he had taken Rudo's measurements while the boy was sleeping. Rudo's face showed zero joy, but at least the equipment was finally done. The group then moved on to syncing their chokers. Each member cut a finger, dropped blood onto Rudo's choker, and he returned the favor. Now they had a full link to communicate as a team. The mission carried them into Penta, the desert wasteland. Rudo revealed his yellow and red mask and showed off his instrument, now proudly named 3R. Over at Raider HQ, Jabber confirmed their target, and his boss decided they would deal with it when they got there. Back in the desert, the squad tore through trash beasts while Tom sat back, scribbling reports and sketches of every creature in sight. Rudo picked up a keyboard, fused it with 3R, and slammed monsters with key imprints until nothing stood. Somewhere far off, a strange girl felt the weapon's power and turned her attention toward him. Through the smoke, Rudo spotted a figure. Tamsi and Delman called to him, and by the time he looked again, the figure had vanished. The squad went on about his performance, unaware the girl was already stalking them. Soon she stepped out, barefaced with no mask, and invited them into her place. Engine stayed calm, ready to talk things through or fight if it came to that. The moment they crossed her threshold, everything turned grim. A strange sound hit the air, Engine collapsed to his knees, and Rudo froze in disbelief while the girl stood smiling, fully in control of the scene. An hour earlier, Amo had already been running her little play. She led the cleaners to that ridiculous tower planted right in the middle of the desert, acting all sweet and calm like she owned the place. They climbed up to her room, and she kept pushing until they gave in and pulled their masks off. She got giddy seeing their faces and started throwing compliments around like she hadn't seen people in years. Engine had signaled Rudo to step up, so the boy tried to ask about meeting someone who could move through the sphere. Amo didn't even let him finish. She jumped to some wild talk about crushes, throwing everyone off. Engine assumed that was the price for the info, but the more he tried to explain, the more lost she looked. Then she snapped. She started muttering, "This is weird," over and over, her vibe shifting from happy host to crazy neighbor. She thought they were there for her, but she realized they only wanted to use her, and that sent her into meltdown mode. Engine lied through his teeth, saying what she wanted to hear, but that only made her mood worse. With a twisted smile, she told Delmon to handle it. A second later, Engine was on his knees, drenched, and the squad was left shook. Nobody knew what just hit him, but Rudo noticed Amo's boots had the same branding as his gloves. She didn't even flinch. She just kept pressing about crushes, grinning like she held all the strings. Zanka tried to talk back, but his words only broke her down into tears. Delman nearly crushed him, showing off his hose, and started bragging that Amo was the whole reason he fought, his so-called sacred duty. Tamsi wasn't buying the idea of mind control, but even he couldn't explain why Delmon was willing to use that hose. Everyone knew it could blow a person up like a balloon if it filled them with too much water. Amo then claimed she had another fan in the group. Rudo's head instantly got hijacked with visions of sphere guards mocking him. They hit so hard that he couldn't even see Delmon's swings, only dodging because Tamsi dragged him clear. Ryu tried to sneak up on Amo, but Zanka yelled her back. She didn't listen, thinking she had to expose the so-called fan, and almost caught a water blast through her chest when Delmon's shot ripped the wall open. Amo laughed at the chaos, mocking them for not trusting each other, saying life would be easier if they just talked to her. Meanwhile, Rudo's mind sank deeper. He saw his teammates as sphere guards, smelled strange scents, and suddenly Amo twisted herself into the girl he once liked. He snapped at the illusion, which only confirmed she had him under her thumb now. Amo explained her trick. She played with smells, twisting memories until everyone saw the person they loved most. Tamsi and Zanka strapped their masks back on, acting like they had already won, but Amo's game was far from done. Rudo jumped in to protect her illusion, claiming his strength like it meant something. Things only spiraled harder when Follow and Ryu also revealed they were under her control. That was the last straw. Tamsi realized they couldn't play soft anymore, so he prepared his vital instrument, even though using it against his own people felt dirty.